We stop here. Vanik, also called as merchants, and this Mirchikatika. Who wrote this? Shudraka. The inscriptions provided a fascinating glimpse of complex social progress and provides insight into the nature of guild or shrenis. Although membership was based on a shared craft specialization, some members adopted other occupations. It also indicates that the members shared more than a common profession. They collectively decided to invest their wealth earned through their craft to construct a splendid temple in honor of the sun god. This. Beyond the four Varnas integration. Given the diversity of the subcontinent, there were always have been population whose social practice were not influenced by Brahmanical ideas. When they figure in Sanskrit texts, they are often described as odd, uncivilized, or even animal-like. In some instances, they included forest dwellers for whom hunting and gathering remained an important means of subsistence. Categories such as the Nishada, to which Eklavya is supposed to have belonged, are examples of this. Others who were viewed with suspicion included populations such as nomadic pastoralists, who could not be easily accommodated within the framework of settled agriculturalists. Sometimes those who spoke non-Sanskritic language were labeled as mlechas and looked down upon. There was nonetheless also a sharing of ideas and beliefs between these people. The nature of relation is evident in the stories of Mahabharata. The next is a tiger-like husband. Sanskrit, yeah.
So Shakas, they also.
Mlechas is basically barbarian or outsiders, foreigners. And obviously, if they are foreigners, they could not speak Sanskrit. So this is why they were looked down upon. Let's see this, the tiger-like husband. This is a summary of a story from Mahabharata. The Pandavas had fled into the forest. They were tired and fell asleep. Only Bhima, the second Pandava, renowned for his prowess, was keeping watch. A man-eating Rakshasa caught the scent of the Pandavas and sent his sister Hidimba to capture them. She fell in love with Bhima, transformed herself into a lovely maiden and proposed to him. He refused. Why? Because he has cracked civil services. Meanwhile, the Rakshasa arrived and challenged Bhima to a wrestling match. Okay. Bhima accepted the challenge and killed him. The others woke up hearing the noise. Hidimba introduced herself and declared her love for Bhima. She told Kunti, I have forsaken my friend, my dharma and my kin, and good lady, chosen your tiger-like son for my man. Whether you think me a fool or your devoted servant, let me join you, great lady, with your son as my husband. Ultimately, Yudhishthira agreed to the marriage on condition that they would spend the day together, but that Bhima would return every night. The couple roamed all over the world during the day. In due course, Hidimba gave birth to a Rakshasa boy named Ghatotkach. Then the mother and son left the Pandavas. Ghatotkach promised to return to Pandavas whenever they needed him. Some historians suggest that the term Rakshasa is used to describe people who practice differed from those laid down in Brahmanical terms. Beyond the four Varnas, subordination and conflict. While the Brahmanas considered some people as being outside the system, they also developed a sharper social divide by classifying certain social categories as untouchables. This rested on a notion that certain activities, especially those connected with performance of rituals, were sacred and by extension pure. Those who considered themselves purely avoided taking food from those they designated as untouchable. In sharp contrast to the purity aspect, some activities were regarded as particularly polluting. This included handling corpses and dead animals. Those who performed such tasks designated as chandalas. So, what are these chandalas? Handling corpses and dead animals. And these chandalas were placed at the very bottom of the hierarchy. Next. Their touch and in some cases even seeing them was regarded as polluting by those who claimed to be at the top of the social order. The Manusmriti laid down the duties of the chandalas. They have to live outside the village, use discarded utensils, and wear clothes of the dead and ornaments of iron. That's a tough life, man. Ornaments of irons. Huh? They could not walk about in villages and cities at night. They had to dispose of the bodies of those who had no relatives and serve as executioners. Much later, the Chinese Buddhist Fa Hien, Fa Xian, wrote that untouchables had to sound a clapper in the streets so that people could avoid seeing them. So it's Fa Xian or Fa Hien, it's the same name. And another Chinese pilgrim, Zhuanzang, we have already seen about him. We had talked about what? Yeah. Observed the executioners and scavengers were forced to live outside the city. I think I have told you the story to the old people, or I don't know, you guys were there or not. The story how they controlled the Africans. Did I tell you about this story? Yes? Right? So, okay, for the new ones, who are these Afro-Americans? Do not use that word, man. See, I'm warning you again. You do not take this class so lightly, or do not use those words. It is for your good. You are a government official if you are saying. Do not act like a normal civilian. So, who are they? Slaves. And how they were like transported to, why they were first of all transported? Yeah. So, the story was when the Britishers, they had occupied USA. Even that was a colony. Even USA was a colony once upon a time. They were doing this a lot of plantation work. But the problem there was the local Red Americans, Red Indians, or what they said, they were facing a lot of diseases. There were some diseases related to that plantation. And this was one reason. And second reason was that these Americans used to run away and hide themselves in some village. And it was difficult for the Britishers to get to know that who was that planter who was working there. Because everyone looked same, all fair. Then they got to know that in Africa, there is a community like this black community. They were free from this disease. And second thing, they are black. So they got them there, they started working, and they cannot run away now. Why? If they run away, they can get to know, okay, he's a black, we have already got him, again send him back to the plantation. So this is how they got the black people to work. And then after that, yeah, so they are from Africa, later on settled there, and they got this name, Afro-Americans, because of the descent stage. Yeah, where that is something related to American Revolution, where all the teas related. Britishers had, that is something else, leave it. It was like they dumped a lot of teas in sea because they were not ready to pay the taxes. No, no representation, no taxes. That was the claim from them. Not important now. Next, so these two people, Fazian and Zhuangzang. So they had spoken about untouchability. By examining non-Brahmanical text which depicts the lives of Chandalas, historians have tried to find out whether Chandalas accepted the life of degradation prescribed in the Shastras. Sometimes these depictions correspond with those in the Brahmanical text, but occasionally there are hints of different social realities. Depiction of mendicants seeking alms, stone sculpture Gandhara. Or you have seen the in Buddhist culture, they wear a robe and they go out to ask for this alm. Alm is like, they say that a bhiksham day. So they eat free food and they roam.
Where can money take to it, sir? Because for their
It's their duty under that. Then only they'll be accepted under the Buddhist culture. There's a source, the Bodhisattva as a Chandala. Did Chandalas resist the attempt to push them to the bottom of the social order? Read the story which is part of the Matanga Jatka. Right, this Matanga Jatka, a Pali text where the Bodhisattvas is identified as Chandala. So what do you mean by this Bodhisattva? Bodhisattva was following the path of Buddha. Once the Bodhisattva was born outside the city of Banaras as a Chandala's son and named Matanga. One day when he had gone to the city on some work, he encountered Dhitta Manglika, the daughter of a merchant. When she saw him, she acclaimed, "I have seen something inauspicious," and washed her eyes. The angry hangers-on then beat him up. In protest, he went and laid down at the doors of her father's house. On the seventh day, they brought out the girl and gave her to him. She carried the starving Matanga back to the Chandala settlement. Once he returned home, he decided to renounce the world. After attaining spiritual power, he returned to Banaras and married her. A son named Mandveya Kumara was born to them. He learned the three Vedas as he grew up and began to provide food to 16,000 Brahmanas every day. So whom they are talking about? This Mandveya Kumara they are talking about. He learned three Vedas. One day Matanga, dressed in rags with a clay bowl in his hand, arrived at his son's doorstep and begged for food. Mandveya replied that he looked like an outcast and was unworthy of help. The food was meant for the Brahmanas, Matanga said. Those who are proud of their birth and are ignorant do not deserve gifts. On the contrary, those who are free from vices are worthy of offering. Mandveya lost his temper and asked his servant to throw the man out. Matanga rose in the air and disappeared. Which movie is that? Kantara. Kantara, that guy will come and he will disappear. Like that. When Dhitta Manglika learned about the incident, she followed Matanga and begged his forgiveness. He asked her to take a bit of the leftover from his bowl and give it to Mandveya and the Brahmanas.
What?
This is what the story was all about. He was living outside the city. He went to the city for some work. This girl saw this guy, and she said that I saw something inauspicious, and she was accompanied by people. They belted him, and now this guy felt bad that for no reason he got hit, and he went to this girl's house and stayed there for 7 days without having food. The girl's father came back with the girl. This girl dropped him to the Chandala's place. There he renounced the world, he learned some new things, then went back to Banaras again, and then he got married to her.
She is one.
Kind of says so like. Next, beyond birth, resource and status. If you recall the economic relation discussed in chapter 2, you will realize that slaves, landless, agricultural laborers, hunters, fisher folk, pastoralists, peasants, village headmen, craftsperson, merchants, and kings emerged as social actors in different parts of the subcontinent. Their social position were often shaped by their access to economic resources. Here we will examine the social implication of access to resources in certain specific situations. Gender access to property. Consider first a critical episode in the Mahabharata during the course of long-drawn rivalry between Kauravas and Pandavas. Duryodhana invited Yudhishthira to a game of dice. The latter, who was deceived by his rival, staked his gold, elephant, chariot, slaves, army, treasury, kingdom, the property of his subject, his brother, and finally himself, and lost all. Then he staked their common wife, Draupadi, and lost her too. Issues of ownership foregrounded in the story such as this one also figures in Dharma Sutras. According to the Manusmriti, the paternal estate was to be divided equally among sons after the death of parent, with a special share for the eldest. Women could not claim a share of these resources. In my village, there is another system. The youngest son will get the house also. Like he'll get the property and the ancestral house. That will be given to the youngest son. What did he do? So special. That is the rule. Okay. He'll get property. The youngest son has a duty, what she said. Okay, this makes sense. Big share. Now I'm saying there's a rule where the youngest son is getting the house. Why? To look after the parents. No, this is what you're saying, like to look after the parents. Okay. Partiality, no? You're just thinking about your side. Think about the women. What about women? What they get? How? What about properties? Careful, huh? There are many girls. Okay. They say right in Hindi, "Beti to paraya dhan hai." So this is how, like, see, all these things already mentioned in the Shastras. It was again reinforced through some ways, which still we follow. You know, one day I was sweeping my own room. I used to study in Delhi. One lady came and like, "You should not do it at night time." They're like, "Why? Fight will happen." It seems. I'm like, with whom? I can just see you. No, I should have. And then she would have said, "See, I said, I told you, fight will happen." It seems. And you should not use scissors night time. I don't know who was this person and what was he thinking when he brought out all these tools.
So, ancient days, right, there used to be a lot of electricity. People used to have lamps around that. So, when you use any sharp objects, like for cutting nails, they used to be blades. So, you would cut yourself instead of.
So everything had a logic, but it's all obsolete now. There's no point to follow that, no? Obviously, there is a logic for everything. What she said is also a logical answer. The whoever takes care of the family, the old people, they'll have the house. But it's not followed, right? He's just getting that house now, and that guy already has a reservation now. How? What about me? Let's move on. However, women were allowed to retain the gifts they received on the occasion of their marriage as Stridhana, women's wealth. This could be inherited by their children without the husbands having any claim on it. At the same time, the Manusmriti warned women against hoarding family property or even their own valuables without the husband's permission. You have read about wealthy women such as Vakataka Queen, Prabhavati Gupta. However, cumulative evidence, both epigraphic and textual, suggests that while upper class women may have had access to resources, land, cattle, and money were generally controlled by men. So, upper class women had some access to resources, land, cattle, money were generally controlled by men. In other words, social differences between men and women were sharpened because of the differences in access to resources. How could men and women acquire wealth? For men, the Manusmriti declares there are 7 means for acquiring wealth: inheritance, finding, purchase, conquest, investment, work, and acceptance of gift from good people. For women, there are 6 means of acquiring wealth. What was given in front of the fire, marriage, or the bridal procession, or as a token of affection, and what she got from her brother, mother, or father. She could also acquire wealth through any subsequent gift and whatever her affectionate husband might give her. So this was the way.
Very common, right? Speed one. So you're not supposed to, that's not important. So when demonetization happened, that is to, it was in France happening. He told when you should come and submit like what? 10, 20,000. The same day, he doesn't have right standing behind. He got 50K. When he has got it from 50K.
So that is not counted for.
That's not taxable. And that was, they said the black money will come out. It was not black money, it was free money. It was kept in this form.
Okay. So what is the moral of the story?
You can buy as much as you want. Then don't pay tax.
Or tell her to invest in stocks. Huh? You work, where are you working? Yeah, you're not in tax department, right? Yeah, okay. Varna and access to property. According to the Brahmanical text, another criterion for regulating access to wealth was Varna. As we saw earlier, the only occupation prescribed for Shudras was servitude, while a variety of occupation were listed for men of the first 3 Varnas. If these provisions were actually implemented, the wealthiest men would have been the Brahmanas and the Kshatriyas. That this corresponded to some extent with social realities is evident from description of priest and king in the other textual tradition. Kings are almost invariably depicted as wealthy. Priests are also generally shown to be rich, though there are occasional depictions of the poor Brahmana. Yet another level, even the Brahmanical view of society was codified into Dharmashastras or Dharmashastras. Other traditions developed critiques of the Varna order. Some of the best known of this were developed within the Buddhism. Chapter 4 will talk about that. The Buddhists recognized that there were differences in societies, but did not regard this as natural or inflexible. They also rejected the idea of claims of status on the basis of birth. So for Buddhists, write this. Buddhists never believed in this. many reasons. But let's see that. What are the reasons? This talks about the wealthy Shudra. This story, based on the Buddhist text in Pali, known as Nikaya, is a part of a dialogue between the king named Avantiputta and a disciple of the Buddha named Kachana. Okay. While it may not be literally true, it reveals Buddhist attitude towards Varna. Avantiputta asked Kachana what he thought about Brahmins, who held that they were the best caste and that all other castes were low. The Brahmanas were a fair caste, while all other castes were dark. That only Brahmanas were pure, not non-Brahmanas. That Brahmanas were son of Brahma, born of his mouth, born of Brahma, formed by Brahma, heir to Brahma. Kanchana replied, what if a Shudra were wealthy? Would another Shudra or a Kshatriya or a Brahmana or a Vaishya speak politely to him? Avantiputta replied that if a Shudra had wealth or corn or gold or silver, he could have as his obedient servant another Shudra to get up earlier than he, to go to rest later, to carry out his orders, to speak politely, or he could even have a Kshatriya or Brahmana or a Vaishya as his obedient servant. Kanchana asked, this being so, are not these four Varnas exactly the same? Avantiputta considered that there was no difference amongst the Varnas on this count. So what is the moral of the story? See, now still we are facing this caste issue, but in cities it has moved out of caste and now it is gone into class. Now we see the class issue. If you are rich, it doesn't matter which caste you belong from, which religion, you are a good person and you will have friends. If you are poor, then the other things will come into picture, which caste, this, that, everything. So this you remember, from caste to class movement, it's happening in cities now. It will it will have, it will go into the rural areas, but it will take time. Rural areas, still we are like seeing that societies of UP and Tamil Nadu, like still it's too high there. Other states cases are not much, but UP and Tamil Nadu too much. What? Yeah. North India is common because it's still there. It runs in the thinking and still follow the old tradition. In South it is not that common, but in Tamil Nadu it is too much common. Like in North India, like it's hardly you'll hear the cases where people have got killed. They have been tortured and everything. You'll see the atrocities cases. South India, in Tamil Nadu, they have got killed, literally killed. The villages have been burnt, and does not come into news at all. I have heard this from the people who are Tamilians. They tell me the stories. There was a movie. There are so many movies which have been made in Tamil. Good one. An alternative social scenario: sharing wealth. So far, we have been examining situations where people either claimed or were assigned status on the basis of their wealth. However, there were other possibilities as well, situations where men who were generous were respected, while those who were miserly or simply accumulated wealth for themselves were despised. One area where these values were cherished was ancient Tamilakam, where, as we saw earlier, there were several chiefdoms around 2000 years ago. Amongst other things, the chiefs were patrons of bards and poets who sang their praises. Poem included in Tamil Sangam and anthologies often illuminated social and economic relationship, suggesting that while there were differences between rich and poor, those who controlled resources were also expected to share them. And this is a story about the poor generous chief. Let's see if there is any information for us. No. A chief and his followers stone sculptures, Amravati. So he's the chief and he's the follower. Okay. Next, explaining social differences, a social contract. The Buddhists also developed an alternative understanding of social inequalities and of the institution required to regulate social conflict. In a myth found in the text known as Sutta Pitaka, write this. We'll discuss this. What they used to do in this, but write this. Sutta Pitaka is related to Buddhism. What happened? Suggested that originally human beings did not have fully evolved body form, nor was the world of plants fully developed. All beings lived in an idyllic state of peace, taking from nature only what they needed for each meal. However, there was a gradual deterioration of this state as human beings became increasingly greedy, vindictive, and deceitful. This led them to wonder, what if we were to select a certain being who should be wrathful when indignation is right, who should censure that which should rightly be censured, and should banish him who deserves to be banished. We will give him in return a proportion of the rice, chosen by the whole people. He will be known as Mahasamata, Sammata or Samrat, the great elect. This suggests that the institution of kingship was based on human choice, with taxes as a form of payment and services rendered by the king. Right now also we have the same kind of things, a modern one, where we choose the government and we pay the taxes. Why? Equitable society. At the same time, it reveals recognition of human agency in creating and institutionalizing economic and social relations. There are other implications as well. For instance, if human beings were responsible for the creation of the system, they could also change it in future. Next is handling text, historian, and Mahabharata. Let's see what is there in this. Mantras, no. Language, Sanskrit is used in Mahabharata, that we know. Then no news in this. It's all about Mahabharata, not needed. If we are planning to give exam for, there's an exam for priest also.
Yes, Brahman did happen.
Yeah.
Like they were the proper written exam.
Yeah. Proper things like how the Gurukuls, old Gurukuls, whatever they used to teach. If you are well versed. Draupadi marriage. So Draupadi marriage is example of what kind of form? Polyandry. Still running into all those things are the Mahabharata. So in this chapter, whatever I have given you, those things are important. Rest no. This only talks about Mahabharata, and Mahabharata will not be asked in the exam. You can quote them in your ethics. Essays also. You can just quote them like what had happened. Yeah. Let's see this timeline. 500 BCE, Ashtadhyayi of Panini, a work of Sanskrit grammar. Write this. They have asked this question. Who has written this Ashtadhyayi? 500 to 200 BCE, major Dharma Sutras. 500 to 100 BCE, early Buddhist texts including Tripitaka. Three Pitaka. Okay, so Sutta Pitaka, Vinaya Pitaka. Okay. So it was in during this time, three Pitakas in Pali. Language you need to remember. Then 500 BC to 400 CE, Ramayana and Mahabharata in Sanskrit. Not important, whatever I'm saying, just those things. This is important. Charaka and Sushruta Samhitas work on medicine. Yeah, both are Samhitas, Sushruta and Charaka. Two famous people in science. The Sushruta is also known as the father of surgery. So this is he only started, yeah, and plastic surgery also. The next compilation of Puranas, Natya Shastra of Bharata, a work of Nivet, and other Dharma Shastras. So we will see the different works of this Kalidasa, Aryabhatta, Varaha Mihira, when we will discuss in detail when we will see the Gupta period. Huh? Varaha Mihira, right? Okay. So a tongue twister for me. Done? Written? Okay. Sure. So this chapter also gets over. You can take break.